Welcome Sydney, welcome Australia, welcome to our delegates from literally all corners of the globe, and welcome to you online as well. A very warm welcome for all of you here for the inaugural Micromobility Conference at the Royal Randwick Racecourse in Sydney. It's a gorgeous day and we have a fantastic program, and it's just great to be here with you. My name is Stephen Hodge. Accost me at any time of the day if you want to know more about what's going on. I would like to begin today by acknowledging the Gadigal of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today with us. A reminder about your mobile phones, silent or off's always a good look. And a quick little comment, we did not put a video waiver in the registration document, so I'm formally letting you know that all sessions will be taped on video and recorded. So if you would not like to appear in any videos, if you sit up in the back corner, you'll miss out. All right. All materials from the conference will be exclusively available to all delegates for 3 months exclusively, okay? And then they'll be put on open access. So immediately after each session is completed, you'll be able to access all sessions live via the video and live stream page of the Micromobility Conference website. You have an access code, all caps, MC Expo 2022, and that's case sensitive. Okay, as a live stream or an in-room delegate, you've paid, I've said that. What we're going to do is make a real effort to stay on time. I've been given, meeting Nazi rights, and I will be very hard. I would like to introduce my co-MC, Scott Green. He is working on his material and we'll call him up. I think, Scott, you're not in the room yet. No, he's not. Okay. For keynotes, we'll give you 1 ring with 1 minute to go, talking about timing, and 2 rings at full time. So I'll just give you a little dong with a lovely Dutch bell when you have a minute to go. And again, 2 rings when your time is up. For spin cycles, the shorter sessions will give you 1 ring with 30 seconds to go, and again 2 at full time. We have time for questions following all sessions, so we'll have roving mics on the floor, and for online delegates, you'll be able to submit questions via the chat, and they'll be conveyed here, and we can get your questions to the speakers. If you do have a question in the room, please remember that we want everyone online to also hear your questions. So if you put your hand up and we point to you, please wait for the microphone to arrive. Say who you are, where you're from, and then you can ask your question. All right. We've made a real effort to ensure that you have time to network and to enjoy the time, let's face it, after 3 years with hardly anything going on face-to-face, this is a really fantastic opportunity for you to meet up again and have some great conversations. So we've got 30-minute breaks in the morning and in the afternoon and a full hour at lunch. And that's a little bit unusual for some conferences, but this is really to ensure that you get the most out of it with your colleagues and your friends here today. Toilets and the breakout room. So Scott, for the alternate breakout sessions, they're next door that way. Toilets are both that way and way down the end of the corridor that way, and exit is where you came in today. Now, of course, the event would not be possible without the generous support of our sponsors. Thanks to presenting partner, the New South Wales Government. This came about through the initiative of Transport for New South Wales, who are also hosting today's opening keynote speaker, Lucy Saunders. And they will be giving further presentations and exhibiting in the expo. And thanks for going over and above to Transport for New South Wales to making this a reality. It's fantastic. Thanks to our Gold Conference sponsors, Beam and Lug and Carry, who will both be presenting during the conference. Thanks to our silver sponsors, Momentum, who has provided the two $4,000 e-bikes that one of you will take home today and one of you will take home tomorrow. That's one of them over there. There are two models. Now, if you want to win the bike, you have to be in the room at 4:55, all right? We won't hang around waiting saying, oh, I know they're just downstairs, or let me call them. Sorry, all right? You have to be in the room when it's drawn, and you don't need to worry about how to get it home because it will be delivered, the same bike, not that bike, but the bike that you want in your size will be delivered to you locally at your nearest Giant bike shop, okay? All right. Thanks also to sponsors of the themes, Oricon, Neuron, Redino Labs and Zoba. To our bike parking sponsors, Abus and SteadyRack. To our coffee cart sponsor, Pon Bike. Thank you, Pon. I really needed that about 15 minutes ago. And our food and drink sponsor, Momentum, and our lanyard sponsor, Ride Report. That's my lanyard. Okay. We'd also like to thank the event partners, Cycling and Walking Australia New Zealand, and we had the first face-to-face meeting, I think, for nearly 3 years yesterday here. The Australian Walking and Cycling Conference, which has been running for over 20 years, thanks to a dedicated group of Adelaide-based volunteers. This year's Micromobility Conference incorporates the Australian Walking and Cycling Conference. We Ride Australia and Bicycle Industries Australia, who are hosting the Cycling Luminaries Award here tonight, and we'll have Osher Gunsberg emceeing that. And Lucy, for those of you who don't know who Osher is, he's a TV personality that our kids love. And that'll be at 7 p.m. here. Bicycle New South Wales, whose CEO is presenting tomorrow, the Micromobility Report. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the twice monthly newsletter. It's an amazing production. It's full of amazing information. World Bicycle Relief, who are the charity partner for the conference, they're exhibiting downstairs if you'd like to find out more or make a donation. Thanks again to all our sponsors and partners. We couldn't have staged this event clearly without an amazing level of support. Now, before we open our keynote speaker, I would like to introduce a special video address from the Minister for Infrastructure, Minister for Cities, and Minister for Active Transport, the Honourable Rob Stokes MP, representing conference partner, the New South Wales Government.
Welcome to all the delegates at Australia's first Micromobility Conference. As Australia's first Minister for Active Transport, I couldn't be more excited that Sydney is hosting this incredibly important conference. As Minister for Active Transport, my role is to make sure that we do everything we can to shape our cities and towns around people and not around cars. Because ultimately, we want to provide people with choice and connectivity so they can get where they're going, not because they're travelling in a petrol-powered ton of metal, but instead because they have choice to connect in the way that they feel suits them best, using all types of e-mobility, whether it's skating, whether it's scooting, whether it's cycling, whether it's walking. All of these modes of transport connect us better to our places, to each other. They're also better for the planet, they're better for our hip pocket, and they're also better for our paunch. In every way, micromobility is definitely the way of the future. If we're absolutely committed, as we should be, to better connecting people and making sure that our cities are really 5-minute cities, if at all possible, the way to do that is through liberating more opportunities to connect via micromobility. That's why the themes of this conference are so important and why I'm delighted to be able to say a few words of welcome.
And thank you to the Minister for that address. As the first ever Minister for Active Transport, I think, in Australia, he is part of a new wave of the ministers who are making a real difference, and we'll hear a lot more about all of that throughout the program. It's now my great pleasure to welcome our opening keynote address. Healthy Streets was developed by Lucy Saunders through her research on the interface of urban spaces and human health. She's a unique combination of public health specialist, urbanist, and transport planner. Highly influential work put health in the heart of city policy in London. Healthy Streets became the framework of the Mayor's 25-year transport strategy, a pillar of the London plan, the spatial plan, and part of all of the Mayor's statutory strategies. Building on her success in London, Lucy now shares her expertise with developers, cities and regions globally. And she's here with us today, of course. The success of this approach is its wide-reaching resonance across political, special interest and professional divides. Lucy shares this approach to engage, influence and coordinate a wide range of stakeholders around a coherent vision. As I'm sure you'll agree, Lucy is a skilled, or you will agree shortly, is a skilled and engaging presenter and teacher who has inspired and trained hundreds of practitioners, advocates and politicians around the world. Please welcome Lucy to the lectern. That's for you.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. You hear my accent, you might be anticipating some gorgeous European streets. This is not going to be pretty, I'm just warning you now. So, introducing a project that I've been working on. I work all over the place. This is a little project I've been working on in London. Very local, but I think it might be really an interesting one for you to draw some themes from this morning. So, I do a lot of work in Australia. I've trained 150 practitioners across Australia in the last few years. I've been meeting a lot of them for the first time in person in the last couple of weeks. And also working with a small group of dedicated professionals across the country to produce their Healthy Streets design check for Australia. And in this session, I'm going to be showing you how we use the England equivalent on a project in the UK. A lot of people think that delivering healthy streets is about spending lots of money and making things look beautiful. And this session is showing you that you can do things with very little money and they don't look very pretty, but they do the job of delivering these 10 Healthy Streets indicators, because Healthy Streets is about meeting basic human needs. The context of this project is that we started in June of 2020, so right at the beginning of the impact of the pandemic in the UK. This is not an exemplar project. There were lots of things we had to compromise on because it was difficult times. But I think that that's important to acknowledge. The focus of our project was not working with people who wanted change, but people who we felt would really benefit from it, who maybe had a lot of struggles going on and weren't able to bring their concerns to us. The focus of the project was on equity and particularly helping children in low-income areas get to school, get to the local park and get out and about. We were given a very clear focus that we had to deliver measurable impacts. This wasn't about making some small changes. We had to be able to measure and show the impacts, and we used the Healthy Streets evaluation framework to do that. Our budget was very limited. We worked in 3 neighbourhoods and we had about 100,000 Aussie dollars to spend in each neighbourhood. And when we're talking about infrastructure, $100,000 does not go very far. And it was a partnership as well, and it was the first time we'd worked together, so it was Healthy Streets, working with a health charity called Impact on Urban Health, and the local council, the LGA, which is called Southwark Council. So the first thing we had to do is choose what we were going to do, and we thought we should ask people what they needed. So we put one of these commonplace maps up. This is one of our 3 neighbourhoods. People drop a pin and add a comment saying what is working well or not working so well. You can go online now and have a look at these 3 neighbourhoods and see what people were saying. The kinds of issues that they were bringing up were that kids were really cramped on the footpaths in front of their schools, so that black cage is the side of a school playground. The footpaths get very narrow around there. Trying to get kids to and from school was very stressful, trying to cross busy roads in the neighbourhood. and often there was a bit of a battle going on between rat-running traffic that was speeding through neighbourhood streets and parents trying to corral children across those busy roads to get to school. So this again is a school wall that you can see in this picture here. We then went out on the streets ourselves. We walked around. This is one of the colleagues I work with on the project, and we looked at what could we do. And we might see something like this and go, right, well, that is an obvious place where we need to have some step-free access. We need some kind of pram ramp here. If we had put a raised table crossing here, it would have been half of our total project budget on one raised table crossing. So we had to think really smartly about what can we do with very little money that's going to deliver the biggest measurable impact. It's easy to work out what you do if you have endless money. It's much more difficult to work out how you have the biggest impact with very little. We had to also recognise we were working on a range of different kinds of streets. So yes, we had small residential streets that were really dominated by rat-running traffic, but we also had some really vital connector roads that were not looking a lot like connector roads during the pandemic. So this is one of the main ways that people get into the strategic road network at the moment. When this picture's taken in the pandemic, it looks like a quiet residential street. The instinct might be, well, we'll just close this off to through traffic. There's a big school there. It would be much better that way. That was absolutely not an option. We have huge trucks and many bus routes running along this street. You just can't tell from looking at this picture because it was the middle of a pandemic lockdown. And we didn't have the option of just pushing all the traffic onto surrounding streets. Healthy streets is not about making some streets healthier while making other ones less healthy. It's about delivering benefit in the round. So we had to be really careful that nothing that we were doing was going to make other streets worse while we were making our project streets healthier. So what did we do? Well, we did some pavement widening, and in this case, what we did here was taking out a slip lane, which meant that the pavement got wider, so it was much safer for people who were walking along here, but it also calmed the traffic down. They were not taking that corner at the same speed. They had a tighter turn, and that meant that it was a safer place for kids walking to school. We put in these cycle stands here, not because there was high demand. You can see no one's locking their bikes on it. This is to stop people driving across the footpaths in their frustration at waiting in traffic queues. So it's basically serving the same purpose as a bollard. And in future, there'll be more people cycling, and they'll probably get used more for locking bikes too. We improved crossing points by narrowing the distance that parents had to dash across with their children. By building out at junctions, it tightens those corners and means people drive in a calmer and more courteous manner. And we narrowed the carriageway space on the streets where we still had to let a lot of traffic go through. So this is a school entrance. You can see lots of cars dropping kids off at school, lots of through traffic as well. This looks horrible, I know, but this is what you do when you don't have very much money. The yellow striped lines on the road are showing you where the edge of the carriageway space is, and we brought them in from the hard curb edges to a much closer, narrower space in the middle. This means people drive more slowly and more courteously, and it also gives us back some more space for the people who are walking to and from the school, and also for people who are dwelling outside of the school. And we added some cycle connections as well. So what you're looking at here is from one neighbourhood through to another neighbourhood across a main road, and there was no physical connection on quiet streets from one filtered, quiet neighbourhood through to the other. So we put these kinds of crossings in, and one of the most gratifying things is when you go on Google Street View and you find that there's actually someone in Google Street View using the facility that you put in place. So I was very pleased when I found this. We added seating. It's very hard to find somewhere to sit down and rest on residential streets. We have to take every opportunity to put seating in. This seemed like a really obvious place where it would benefit from a seat. And indeed, when I went there, people would stop me, not knowing that it was my project, and say, "This is really good, isn't it? There's a seat here." And I go, "Yeah, it is really good, isn't it?" But the big thing, the thing that had the biggest impact, the biggest measurable impact, was adding something called traffic filters. So what this means is putting these physical barriers in the street. In some places they were camera enforced, but mostly the cheapest way to do it was with physical barriers that mean that people can still drive to every front door, the emergency services can still get through, but they can't drive private cars through neighbourhood streets. You can still, of course, walk and cycle. So how did we do it? We didn't have very much money, so we had to accept that good enough was good enough. So I showed you this street earlier on. I showed you that the changes we made did not look very nice. We would have loved to have built this all out properly. We would have loved to have made it look gorgeous. We did not have the money to do that, so we used big lumps of concrete to achieve the same outcome. We used very low-cost measures, and they're not very durable. So you can see the planter box here has been moved by someone physically coming out at night and moving the planter box so they could drive past it. And the kind of scattering of concrete blocks is where people have just driven into it. So it wasn't very durable, but I would say that it may have been an advantage in terms of getting buy-in from the community. No one accused us of wasting public money because it was clear we had not spent very much money. It wasn't public money anyway, it was charity money, but that's often a complaint that you get. And also, no one felt like we had already decided what the end outcome was going to be. It was clearly temporary changes that we were making. And we didn't just focus on through movement. It wasn't about routes and movement and getting people from A to B and connections. It was about thinking about these streets as being places in people's community and making sure that we always thought about walking as well as cycling and also being in places. So again, I'm showing you one of our neighbourhood streets. This is what it looked like beforehand on Google Street View, and this is what it looked like afterwards. So we had some people out there, even when the Google van came down, out sitting on the seats, quietly being in their street environment, something they never would have done before. This is not in our project neighbourhood. This is somewhere else in London, also a COVID response measure. We did not have brightly coloured pots. As you've seen, it looks pretty drab what we did in our neighbourhoods. And that was somewhat deliberate because we wanted people to be focusing on how the street felt, not arguing about what colour the pots were. So we wanted to keep the focus on how does the street feel and also leave it open that if we get to make this permanent, then the community can start shaping what it looks like and then they can have the discussion about what they want it to look like. So we tried to keep it as plain as possible so that the focus was on how do I feel about this change in how the street is being managed rather than thinking about whether they like the aesthetic of the design. And those of you who've heard me speak before will know that I talk a lot about making sure that we frame what we're doing on streets in terms of giving, not just in terms of taking. And when we put things like traffic filters in, they can be seen as taking space or freedom away from people driving. So it was important that we paired that with lots of small measures that showed that we were giving. And this is an example of where we made a small fix in a footpath that made it accessible and much easier for people to travel along on their way to school. Think of all the push chairs and prams that have to go along these footpaths, going down and up again, and now they get a nice clear route through. So small acts of giving to show that this was a balanced approach and we were thinking about everyone's needs, with a particular focus on access and equity. So what happened? We used the Healthy Streets design check tool as our means of measuring what happened. We had other measures as well, but I have just a short time with you today. In January, you can read the full project report, which shows you all the other things that we measured. But this spreadsheet tool is our way of objectively measuring improvements in the healthiness of the streets, and they give every street a score out of 100. And as I said, there is an equivalent tool for Australia that does the exact same thing. So this is one of our project streets. This is what it looked like before we made any changes. We ran the Healthy Streets check. It gave it a score of 29 out of 100. The things that helped to get its score as high as 29 are shown here. But there were many more things that were bringing its score down, and a lot of them we did not have the budget to fix. So we had to look at, with the budget that we've got, with the ability to make these temporary changes, what can we do to get that score to go up? So this is what we put in place: a traffic filter, which is what that bollard is, a bench, planters, and we added the drop curb to improve accessibility. This shows you what comes out of the Healthy Streets check tool. You get the colourful Healthy Streets diagram that you may all be familiar with already, and that shows you how the score goes up for each of the Healthy Streets indicators, and the same information is presented in a table as well. The key thing to look at always is what is the overall Healthy Streets score. In this case, the score of the street went up from 29 to 39, so a 10 percentage point increase in the score. That is tough to do. It's a very, very conservative tool. It's difficult to get the score to go up. You have to make quite significant changes to get the score to go up by 10 percentage points, so we were really happy with that outcome. This is not just one street, it's done in every one of our 3 neighbourhoods on multiple streets. So here I'm showing you in pink which were our project streets, the streets where we were making some kind of change to how traffic was moving around in it. And it's also highlighting where the schools and the parks are in relation to those project streets. And then you can see very, very small, the tiny things we did. And this just shows how much of a change you can make to how streets feel with very small interventions. So you can just about see where we put 3 or 4 traffic filters in, we put in a few benches and a few minor improvements in terms of accessibility and connectivity. And this shows you what the scores were and how they changed for each of those streets. So on our project streets, we got the score to go up on average around 10 percentage points across each of our streets. And even on the one where we made no physical changes, we made the score go up as well. However, I mentioned at the beginning it was important that we didn't get the scores to go up on our pink project streets at the expense of our boundary streets, so our streets around our neighbourhood. So we also measured the impact on the Healthy Streets Check score of all of our surrounding streets as well. And 2 of them, the score stayed exactly the same, and 1 of them, the score even went up as a result of what we did. So a really positive outcome in terms of equity and making sure that in the round we're delivering a healthier environment for local people. The timeline I think is worth sharing with you. It might be of interest. We started the project back in June of 2020. We began building it within 6 months, which is real breakneck speed in transport terms, to go from coming up with the concept that we might do something to actually implementing it in 6 months. About 6 months after that, we had a public consultation. So we asked the community, what do you think? Do you want it to go? Do you want it to stay? Do you want it to stay and have more? And the majority of people said that they wanted it to stay, or to stay and have even more changes as well. And that meant that we could then go through the legal process of getting these changes made permanent. So they're still in place today. You could go to London and have a look at them and see that that's exactly how the streets still look. But maybe the ultimate test was the next election, which happened in May of this year. So all the local politicians were up for re-election. There'd been a lot of discussion in the media about how this was going to be political suicide to get involved in these kinds of projects. All of our councillors were re-elected as a result of that election. I'm not saying it was all down to this project. There were a lot of other things going on in the UK at the moment that you might have heard about that are causing people to go out and vote, but it certainly didn't make things worse for them. So a really good outcome for the councillors. And this is what the streets look like now. As I've said, the actual physical changes don't look that pretty, but we see people using streets in a different way. So this is a local business that now feels that they can have some outdoor seating. It feels like a much more pleasant place for people to sit and have a drink. For people who are moving around the neighbourhood, they can cross a street without having to check both ways and assess the risk to their own life of crossing that street. They can just walk along and maybe think about something else, which is lovely. We find people are using streets in different and unusual and sometimes extraordinary ways, and we're definitely finding that the fact we couldn't widen the footpaths hasn't been so much of a barrier, because people can now walk in the carriageway space instead, and that's a lot more accessible for a lot of people, particularly those pushing shopping trolleys filled with milk. People from all walks of life are out and about cycling through our neighbourhood in a relaxed manner, and they're scooting as well. And the deliveries can still get through. They're using their trolleys to get through the filters, but also the delivery vans are still able to get to where they need to go to. So everyone is still able to live their lives in these kinds of neighbourhoods. And we start to see more people with smiles on their faces when they're travelling through these streets rather than looking stressed. But I want us to kind of come back to why we do all of this, which is about making everyday life easier for local people, giving people some breathing space, and thinking about those little moments that can be so stressful, becoming that little bit easier because people have got the room, the space, the calm and the quiet to just deal with one task at a time when they're out on the street. In this case, trying to coax a toddler into a pushchair, which is never an easy task. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lucy. What we'd like to do now is to open the floor, and we have a good amount of time. Do I have my microphone bearers? I do. And we've got two people. So, Phil, you have a question behind you, and then we'll go to the person here in the white shirt after that.
Thank you for the present.
You can grab one of those if you want.
All right. Thank you for the presentation. Do you have measurements of what happened to total vehicle kilometers of travel in the neighborhood and on the surrounding streets?
Hello?
Yep, you're on.
Yeah, okay. So the Healthy Streets Check tool is measuring traffic volumes, traffic speeds, and traffic mix. So that's all baked into the tool. So what we found was traffic volumes and traffic speeds went down on our project streets. Traffic volumes and traffic speeds stayed the same on our surrounding streets.
Person in the front here, yep.
Monica Ollis-Lagas from the International Road Assessment Programme. Thank you so much for that presentation. It was really great to see what had been done in London during this time and during COVID. And just because you were saying about the budget and really not having much to spend, and that's totally understandable in the context. But obviously, I'm interested in your opinion on where, going on from here. Streets cost a lot to build in the first place. They cost a lot to maintain. Often when they're very wide areas of tarmac, that's all. How can we better utilise construction and maintenance budgets to get better outcomes like this, both in London and perhaps for other examples around the world?
So building new streets, most of the cost comes from the build itself, and what we try to encourage is the use of that design check tool at the design stage so that we're designing health in at the beginning. So ideally, at almost no cost at all, just about 20 minutes time of the engineer who's designing the street, they run that check and they work out how can I design this street to be healthy from the outset. And that will obviously pay dividends in the long term in terms of making it a good place that supports people to live healthy and well. I also do a lot of work with maintenance teams who are maintaining the network and looking at how they could do their job differently. So not thinking about how do we maintain the status quo, but how can we take opportunities through the maintenance program to deliver improvements in terms of healthy streets. So how can we remove features from the street that encourage aggressive driving? How can we introduce elements that are more resilient to climate change, that are lower maintenance, that are easier for people to look after in the long term, but that are also making the street feel like a healthier place as well?
Adam Rogers, and could I just remind you watching online, you can ask questions through the chat function and we'll get it up here.
Hi Lucy, just a simple question. The bollards in those streets, they're obviously removable. Are they automatic or locked, or how do they work?
They're not automatic and they're not locked. They're just bollards. Automatic ones have been extremely problematic and very expensive. Just putting a bollard in is very, very cheap. So what we do is right at the beginning of the project, before we even decide where we're doing something, we talk to the emergency services about their primary routes for getting to different buildings, getting to different locations, and make sure they still have the access that they need. We've just used fixed solid bollards where we got people repeatedly physically removing barriers. We changed to a camera enforced system, which is slightly more expensive.
Okay, we've got Mark Ames and Sam down the front, second after Mark.
Hi Lucy, nice to see you. Great presentation, thank you. Talking about bollards, you mentioned people moving planter boxes, removing bollards, and then there being quite a lot of chatter in the lead up to the local election. Can you share a little bit more about what that landscape was like, and perhaps, who were the actors that helped to overcome it?
I think the story in the media was not what we were finding with these 3 project locations. So I think there was real variation in terms of different places and how people responded to them. So our 3 neighbourhoods were places where the majority of people don't own a car and are living on low incomes and are struggling to get through each week. They do not have the energy for getting engaged, and that's not necessarily a good thing. It means that they can't positively influence things, as well as not being in a position to be able to go and talk to the media and really kind of rile people up. There was a certain number of people who felt very strongly that there must be another way of getting to the same outcome, who didn't want these changes made. But the majority of people for our 3 project neighbourhoods were just trying to get through life. One thing that we did do that I didn't mention in my presentation was, although we weren't allowed to go out and do formal consultation with the public because there was a pandemic going on, we did train up online some local community members and ask them to go out and talk to their neighbours, friends and family and give us regular feedback about what people were saying. And that was incredibly helpful, because they could say things like, they don't understand why you've done that, they're not sure what's going on here, and then we could go and fix things, improve things and communicate better what people needed. So that was a really useful tool in the process. So yeah, we had one planter that one particular individual felt really strongly shouldn't be where it was, and they went out every night and moved it, and eventually we got bored of putting it back and changed it for a camera enforced block. But in other places it was a very different story, and I'm happy to talk more about that later on with anyone who's interested.
Thanks, Lucy. Sam Reich from Newcastle. I was just interested in the improvement in Healthy Streets score for the Boundary Road. I wondered if you could give us a few more details.
Yeah, so our aim was not that the boundary streets would not become more unhealthy. That was our goal, that they would stay the same. But one of them did actually become healthier on this example and on our other neighbourhoods as well. And that's because when you put a filter in that means that traffic can't turn off a main road, it reduces the risk of hitting people cycling along a street when turning off onto side roads. So one of the things that's measured in that Healthy Streets check tool is safety of people cycling through junctions. So if you're banning vehicle movements turning in and out of streets, it helps to make those junctions safer for the people cycling through.
Anna at the front.
Thanks, Lucy. In one of the very last slides that you had, I noticed there was an image of secure bike parking, and I'm just wondering if there were any sort of private developer or residential owner contributions that further provided outcomes in these neighbourhoods.
So the very well spotted, there was something that looks like a roll-top red bin, dark green roll-top red bin on the street. That is secure cycle parking, where an on-street car parking space is replaced with a secure parking kind of storage unit for about 6 residents to lock their bikes in. That was not part of the project, that was there already. That's a programme that is rolling out all across London, so you will see them everywhere. And these programmes are paid for by the LGA. So residents pay a different amount in different boroughs to rent a space, but they're all managed by the LGA.
And a question up the back.
Thanks, Lucy. Rebecca from Adelaide. Just wondering, did you have any data on the number of cycle trips or kids walking to school, that type of thing? Showing increases?
Yeah, we had video footage that looked at people walking, people cycling and people dwelling on our project streets to see how that changed. We also had 2 control neighbourhoods, so 2 other neighbourhoods where we were making no changes at all, where we could compare what was happening in our control neighbourhoods with our project neighbourhoods. Now, what we found was there was some changes on streets in terms of an uplift of people walking and cycling, but it seemed to be that people were rerouting. So they were rerouting onto the nicer, quieter streets rather than that there was an overall uplift. And we have a lot of different theories as to why we haven't yet seen a big uplift. The nature of this place is that there are a lot of local people who don't have a choice but to walk and cycle, and they do so in a very car-dominated environment, so they have a safer and healthier environment to live in, but they don't have a lot of short discretionary car journeys that they can themselves switch away from car. So the reduction in cars on those neighbourhood streets is probably not a reflection of local people changing their behaviour, but of through traffic being moved back onto the main roads where it should have been in the first place.
Lucy, we have a question from Robert McLean online. Have you done any work in Australia? When and what?
Yes. So I do work in Perth, I do work in Sydney, and I train practitioners across Australia on how to apply the Healthy Streets approach in their local context. So my job is not to do things for other people, it's to help them do what they want to do, and most of what I do is capacity building, training and support for people who are doing good stuff out in their communities across Australia.
Okay, we've got a few more minutes, so I have a question at the front and one from Stuart up the back after that.
Hi, I'm Jackie from Newcastle. I was wondering, have you applied this Healthy Streets to the outer suburbs, which are very car-dominated and not necessarily poor, but they're not nice places to walk on for sort of, different kind of reasons?
Yeah, so the Healthy Streets approach is a framework on what people need from streets, but how you go about delivering it is really different in different contexts. So here, this example is a context where we had very little money, very little time. It had to be temporary. The context was an area where people are experiencing the negative externalities of other people's driving. So that's why we came up with this solution. But you would not just take this and plonk it on any other neighbourhood anywhere in the world. You always start with what's the context we're working in and what do we need to do next. So what you would do in an outer suburb where people are much more car dependent would be completely different. And I hope that next year you'll all be coming back and presenting what you've been doing to address that very issue. So I look forward to that.
Okay, we've got a question up the back.
Thank you. Thanks, Lucy. Stuart Athred from the Amy Gillett Foundation. I think there's a really interesting lesson here about advocates pitching an idea and a charity funding an idea and a council letting that idea happen. Can you just explain how that actually worked? How fertile was the ground within the council to allow this to actually happen?
So I think the council were very happy for someone else to provide the funding. So yeah, it's wonderful going to a council with some money, even if it's not very much, and saying, can we work together? So they had it written in their strategy that they wanted to do this kind of thing, but the challenge for them is resourcing. And the resourcing that we brought in as Healthy Streets and Impact on Urban Health was not just money, but also being able to manage the whole process, design what we do, sort out the evaluation, do the communication. So really the council were such a core part of it because they can do all the heavy lifting, but we helped to make sure that it was relatively straightforward and easy to do. I should also say something that I didn't mention in the presentation was when we were working out what are we going to do, we as a project team went out on the streets, but we went with our local advocacy groups. So we went with the local cycling advocates and the local accessibility and walking advocates. And we said, you know these streets better than us. What do you think needs to happen? Another core part of it was that right at the beginning we spoke to the councillors and said, we can work anywhere on your patch, where do you want us to work? And they said, don't do that bit's coming next year, you could do here, they're probably going to be okay with it. So getting that input from the local councillors on where is going to be receptive to some change, or at least less hostile to change, is very useful as well.
We've got 2 minutes and we've got a question up the back, and then I've got a small gift for Lucy, and then we will ask for our next speaker.
Heath Ryan, thanks for that presentation, Lucy. That was really interesting. Just following on from the last question, you talked about the secure bicycle parking that was rolling out across the LGA. That's the London Greater Area?
No, that was just the local government area, which is, in this case, it's called Southwark, so it's a London borough with a population of about 500,000 people. Okay,
so my question is, do you deal with the local council, or with, do you have to negotiate with every single council when you implement something?
So if you're talking about the bike, you're talking about the bike storage?
Or what you did, like if what you did works, do you have to then negotiate with the next council, the next council, the next council to get it to roll out across?
So the policy framework is in place in London that says local councils should be doing this kind of thing. The challenge that they have is the resourcing on actually making it happen. So what we brought in was a lot of the resourcing to help to make it happen. But the policy framework is there already.
Thanks.
Would you all join with me in thanking Lucy Saunders very much. And Lucy, we have a delightful little book for you as a present. It's an innovation of Phil Latz to do something different. So, thank you very much, Lucy. It's now my pleasure to introduce our gold sponsor, Beam's Tom Cooper, to provide a short address. And he's making the walk a long one from the back of the room, so we all have a chance to get to know Tom before he actually speaks to us. G'day, Tom.
Good morning. Let me just adjust this. Good morning. It's fantastic to be here, and thank you very much to Phil for organising this event. It's so exciting to be in a room full of people that are passionate about micromobility. It's something that I'm incredibly passionate about. And today I want to talk a little bit about how micromobility can help replace car trips and the stigma around cars at the moment. There's a lot to talk about, and electric cars are in the media constantly. And look, don't get me wrong, I think they're fantastic and they have a future in transportation. But one thing that they don't address is that they take up so much space on the road. It doesn't matter if it's a Tesla four-wheel drive or a diesel Land Cruiser, they're taking up the same amount of space. The other challenge is that they're incredibly expensive, and so they're out or unattainable for much of the population around the world. Car parking is something that we don't touch on that often, and it's something I want to talk about today. For every one car, it is estimated that there's between 3 and 4 car parks around a city. When you think about it, that sounds like a lot, but you have a car park at home, work, gym, supermarket, beach, and the list goes on. And the challenge is you can never find a car park where you need it because everyone's driving to the same spots. And so I wanted to share a couple of examples of how cities have changed it up. So there was a study undertaken in Toronto, Canada, where for 13 weeks they replaced car parks with outdoor dining for local businesses. And in these local businesses, they could set up cafes, whatever they wanted. And over the 13 weeks, there was $181 million of expenditure by the local community in those spots. If those car parks had remained as just car parks, it would have generated $3.7 million in expenditure. So there was a significant increase in expenditure. Another example is in Bogota, Colombia, where they've built over 386 miles of protected bike lanes. Now, to do this, they had to remove some car parking, but they made a commitment that they wanted to incentivise active transport and get people to actively do it every day and feel safe. And so, over the last 12 months, they've saved 22,000 tonnes of carbon emissions. That's equivalent to planting 350,000 trees. And then a little bit closer to home, in Auckland, where we operate micromobility, the council has turned car parks into micromobility hubs. And in those spots, we can fit 15 e-scooters or e-bikes. And that means that there's 15 opportunities for people to come to that one spot, rather than just having, as we all know, the majority of car trips in Australia are done by single occupant vehicles, and it's less than 5 kilometres. And that's the sweet spot for micromobility. So by creating opportunities for more people to get to where we need, we can decarbonise transport. I think that the telling fact is that over 11.9% of all carbon emissions around the world are from road transportation. 30 seconds, okay, I better be quick. Beam is thrilled to be part of today's event. The journey of micromobility is just starting in Australia and New Zealand, and it's exciting to see so many cities and councils undertaking that journey. At Beam, we believe the future of livable cities is a shared electric transportation system that integrates with public transport. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tom. We're going to introduce the next charity partner. Now, we have a short video and then an address from our charity partner, World Bicycle Relief's Farai Matangadura, and he'll tell me how I say his name properly when he comes up.
Mobilize Communities is a holistic program approach that seeks to empower the community across sectors. Through Mobilize Communities, we seek to create a sustainable bicycle ecosystem and uplift the community as a whole. Bicycles help communities like Wange, where transport is a major problem. People have to walk long distances to access basic amenities and services. The Coming In of a Bicycle program addresses issues that most people take for granted, being able to move from one point to the other.
The Mobilize Communities focus on 5 sectors. We have the health sector, where we're targeting the village health workers, the traditional leadership, targeting people like the chief, the village heads, the water and sanitation, targeting the pump minders. We also targeted women to empower women, since this is a patriarchal society. The education sector, where we're targeting students.
We empower female students so that they are able to bridge the gap of marginalization. It is important to us to sustain a viable bicycle ecosystem through the availability of quality bicycles and parts to support that, as well as the maintenance and servicing through our mechanics programs. We are creating a culture of riding with these communities, providing them with an affordable transport means that allows them to connect together and have a better quality of life through the power of the bicycles.
The lectern is yours, Farai.
Good morning. My name is Farai Mtangadura. That's how you say it. You did well. You did well. And I'm the Africa Institutional Markets Lead for World Bicycle Relief. I'm delighted to be here in Australia, visiting from Zimbabwe. That was my colleague, Irene Mlunjwana, who's head of our programs in that video, sharing about the work we're doing in the mobilized communities. So in the African communities that World Bicycle Relief works, accessing clean and safe water is a daily struggle. Communities rely on village wells, which means transporting water to and from home. And I have to tell you, water is heavy, and the burden for this job often rests with women and girls. I've seen myself through our programs that many families live below the poverty datum line and are unable to obtain healthcare and education. Too many children don't attend school because they must travel long distances on foot. But life is changing. World Bicycle Relief's Buffalo Bicycles offer a solution to these challenges. It costs only $215 to donate a Buffalo bicycle. And these bikes can carry 100 kgs, a load of 100 kgs. They're built of steel and weigh 23 kilograms. I can tell you that the Buffalo bike is tough and it never gives up. The model is sustainable because we train bicycle mechanics in every community so they can keep the bicycles on the move and they can generate income for themselves. All of our Buffalo bicycles are assembled locally, creating opportunities for employment, and World Bicycle Relief has also established a supply chain of spare parts. The global cycling community has from the very start assisted World Bicycle Relief to deliver over 600,000 bicycles. In fact, only last year, Lachlan Morton, as part of EF Education's RAFA team, beat the peloton to Paris and raised funds for the organization. Help us. We want to work with you. So come during the breaks and talk to me or Di Mason, who is at the back there. and she's our development director here in Australia. With your support, children will be riding to school, farmers can transport their goods to market, and village healthcare workers can reach more patients. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Fry. And they're downstairs in the expo. Now, very quickly, we'll be taking a 30-minute break. The next session will start at 10:30 sharp, of course. Now, I mentioned how fantastic it is to be in the room with each other again. So take the opportunity to search out some people that you haven't seen for a while or that you don't know and have a chat. Come back to this room after at 10:30 if you want to attend the Making It Right theme about infrastructure, and if you want to attend the Making It There theme about transport, then you go to the breakout room behind that. Petition entrance is from the same corridor. So we're running both themes with the same schedule so that if you want to, you can jump from one to another and back again. So the changeovers in speakers are the same. All of the details about speakers, sessions and times are on the website, on the program summary menu, and it's optimised for mobile phone use. Now, all of your meals and snacks during the conference are served next door that way. And you're welcome to eat out on the balcony, which has beautiful views of the city, or in the foyer, or next door, down at the expo, or bring it back in here. Anywhere is absolutely fine. See you at 10:30.